Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the quantum resonance scanner for the third time that morning. The device hummed quietly on the workbench, its metallic surface gleaming under the harsh laboratory lights aboard the research station New Horizon. After 6 months of failed experiments, today felt different. Today, he might finally crack the code that had been driving him crazy. The door to his lab hissed open, and ZYX Tau glided in on 4 spindly legs. The Corvani scientist stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale blue skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their large black eyes fixed on Marcus with the kind of intense curiosity that had made them famous throughout the galaxy for their scientific discoveries. "Human Marcus," ZYX Tau said in their melodic voice, "I have completed my analysis of the stellar formation data you requested. The patterns are most intriguing." Marcus looked up from his work, grateful for the distraction. Working with ZYX Tau had been one of the few bright spots during his assignment to this joint research facility. While most aliens treated humans as useful but unremarkable, the Corvani scientists showed genuine interest in human methods and thinking. "Thanks, ZYX. You could just call me Marcus, you know. We've been working together for months now." ZYX Tau tilted their elongated head in a gesture Marcus had learned meant amusement. "I prefer to maintain proper respect protocols. Your species may appear young to the galaxy, but your contributions have been surprisingly valuable." Marcus chuckled. Coming from a member of a species that had been exploring space for over 10,000 years, that was practically a glowing endorsement. He turned back to his scanner, making final adjustments to the harmonic frequency modulators. "What are you working on today?" ZYX Tau moved closer, their large eyes studying the device with scientific fascination. "Still trying to perfect the quantum resonance scanner. The theory is sound, but I can't get the energy output to stabilize. Every time I think I've got it figured out, something goes wrong." The scanner was Marcus's pet project, something he'd been developing since his graduate studies on Earth. The idea was to create a device that could analyze quantum signatures in real time, potentially revolutionizing how scientists studied everything from subatomic particles to stellar phenomena. The problem was that no one had been able to build a stable version that worked consistently. "May I observe your testing procedure?" ZYX Tau asked politely. "Of course. Maybe a fresh perspective will help." Marcus activated the scanner's primary systems. The device began its startup sequence, internal components spinning up with a low whine. Energy readings appeared on the holographic display, showing the gradual buildup of quantum resonance fields within the scanner's core matrix. "The initial phase looks stable," Marcus murmured, watching the numbers climb steadily. "Energy levels are within normal parameters. Field coherence is holding." ZYX Tau leaned closer, their 4 arms folded behind them in a pose Marcus recognized as intense concentration. "The harmonic frequencies appear well-calibrated. Your mathematical approach is quite elegant." "Thanks. The hard part is maintaining stability when the resonance fields interact with external quantum signatures. That's where everything usually falls apart." The scanner reached its operational threshold, and Marcus held his breath. This was the critical moment. He activated the external sensors, designed to scan quantum signatures in the surrounding environment. For a few seconds, everything looked perfect. The energy levels remained steady, the field coherence held strong, and the quantum resonance patterns appeared exactly as predicted. Then, ZYX Tau reached out with one of their 4 arms to examine the scanner's external housing more closely. The moment their elongated fingers touched the device's surface, something extraordinary happened. The scanner's energy output spiked dramatically. The display showed power levels jumping from normal operational ranges to nearly 3 times the theoretical maximum. But instead of overloading and shutting down as it had during previous tests, the device seemed to absorb and integrate this massive energy surge. "What in the—" Marcus stared at the readings in disbelief. "That's impossible. The power core can't generate that much energy." ZYX Tau jerked their hand back, startled. "Did I damage your equipment? I apologize if my touch caused malfunction." "No, wait." Marcus studied the display more carefully. The energy levels had dropped back to normal the moment ZYXTAL withdrew their hand, but the scanner was still operational. More than operational, it was working better than he'd ever seen it work before. Touch it again. Are you certain? I do not wish to cause further problems. Please, I need to see if that was just a fluke. ZYXTAL hesitantly placed their hand back on the scanner's surface. Immediately, the energy readings shot up again, even higher than before. But this time, Marcus was ready. He watched every sensor reading, every energy flow pattern, every quantum resonance measurement. This is incredible, he breathed. The device isn't malfunctioning. It's working exactly as designed, just with about 4 times the normal power input. I do not understand. How can my touch provide additional energy to your machine? That was the million-credit question. Marcus ran through everything he knew about Corvani physiology. They were silicon-based life forms with unique bioelectric properties, but nothing in the literature suggested they could transfer energy to mechanical devices through simple contact. Let me run a full diagnostic, Marcus said, his fingers flying over the holographic interface. I want to measure exactly what's happening when you touch the scanner. The diagnostic revealed something that made Marcus's eyes widen. When ZYXTAL made contact with the device, their bioelectric field was somehow interfacing directly with the scanner's quantum resonance matrix. But instead of disrupting the delicate energy patterns as expected, the alien's natural bioelectric signature was amplifying and stabilizing them. Your bioelectric field, Marcus said slowly, it's perfectly tuned to the scanner's harmonic frequency. That's why the power output increases. Your nervous system is acting like a secondary power source and a stabilizing influence at the same time. ZYXTAL examined their own hand with newfound curiosity. This is most unusual. Corvani bioelectricity typically interferes with sensitive equipment. We must use special isolation protocols when working with delicate instruments. That's probably true for most technology. But this scanner operates on quantum resonance principles that apparently mesh perfectly with your species' bioelectric patterns. It's like your nervous system and my device were designed to work together. The implications hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. If Corvani bioelectric fields could enhance quantum resonance technology, it could revolutionize dozens of different scientific applications. More than that, it suggested possibilities for biological technological interfaces that no one had ever imagined. Would you mind if we ran some more tests? Marcus asked excitedly. This could be the breakthrough I've been looking for. I'm intrigued by this phenomenon as well. What kind of test do you propose? For the next several hours, they experimented with different contact methods and measurement techniques. The results were consistent and remarkable. Not only did ZYXTAL's touch dramatically improve the scanner's performance, but the improvement was proportional to the area of contact. When the Corvani scientist placed both hands on the device, the energy output nearly doubled again. This is beyond anything I imagined when I designed this thing, Marcus said, staring at readings that showed the scanner operating at efficiency levels that should have been theoretically impossible. With this kind of power and stability, we could scan quantum signatures across entire star systems. ZYXTAL was equally amazed. The precision of the measurements is extraordinary. We are detecting quantum fluctuations that our most advanced sensors cannot register. But as exciting as the discovery was, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The bioelectric enhancement was too perfect, too precisely tuned to be mere coincidence. It was as if the scanner and ZYXTAL's nervous system had been specifically designed to work together. ZYX, Marcus said thoughtfully, what do you know about ancient Corvani technology? Specifically, anything involving bioelectric interfaces. The alien's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. That is a very specific question. Why do you ask? Because this level of compatibility doesn't happen by accident. The harmonic frequencies match too perfectly. Either this is the most incredible coincidence in the universe, or there's something about Corvani biology that was specifically adapted for this kind of technological interface. ZYX Tau was quiet for a long moment, their skin shimmering with what Marcus had learned were patterns of deep thought. Finally, they spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "There are legends among my people, ancient stories that most Corvani dismiss as primitive mythology. They speak of a time when our ancestors worked alongside other species to create technologies that bridge the gap between biological consciousness and mechanical precision." What kind of technologies? The legends are vague and contradictory, but they describe devices that could amplify thought itself, machines that responded not just to physical commands but to the intentions and consciousness of their operators. Most modern Corvani consider these stories to be metaphorical rather than literal. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What if they weren't metaphors? What if your ancestors really did develop bioelectric interface technology, and that's why your species evolved these specific bioelectric patterns? You suggest that Corvani physiology itself is the result of ancient technological adaptation. It would explain everything. The perfect harmonic match, the energy amplification, even why most of your technology requires isolation protocols. Your nervous systems weren't designed for normal electromagnetic interfaces. They were designed for something much more sophisticated. The two scientists stared at each other, both grasping the magnitude of what they might have discovered. If Marcus's theory was correct, they weren't just looking at a useful technological quirk. They were looking at evidence of an ancient civilization that had achieved a level of biological technological integration that current galactic science couldn't even imagine. "We need to test this further," Marcus said finally. "If I'm right, this scanner isn't just benefiting from your bioelectric field. It's responding to something much deeper, something that might have been built into Corvani genetics millions of years ago." And if you're correct, then these experiments might reveal secrets that my people have forgotten for countless generations. As they prepared for more extensive testing, neither scientist could have imagined how their discovery would ultimately reshape their understanding of the galaxy's history, or how it would reveal connections between species that have been hidden for millions of years. 3 days after their initial discovery, Marcus and ZYX Tal had transformed the laboratory into something resembling a high-tech archaeological dig. Equipment from across the research station cluttered every available surface, jury-rigged together in configurations that would have made safety inspectors flee in terror. But the results were worth the chaos. Energy output is holding steady at 460% of baseline, Marcus called out, his eyes glued to the holographic displays surrounding the quantum resonance scanner. "Harmonic coherence is perfect. I've never seen readings this clean." ZYX Tal stood with both hands placed flat against the scanner's modified interface panels, their skin shimmering with concentration. They had discovered that the bioelectric enhancement wasn't just about touch. It responded to conscious intention. When ZYX Tal focused their thoughts on specific aspects of the scanner's operation, those systems showed dramatic improvements in performance. "The quantum signature analysis is remarkable," ZYX Tal said, their voice carrying a note of wonder that Marcus had never heard before. "I can perceive the scanner's processes as if they were extensions of my own nervous system. It is unlike anything I have experienced." Dr. Sarah Kim burst through the laboratory door, her expression mixing excitement with exasperation. The station's chief xenobiology officer had been trying to understand their discovery from a biological perspective, running every test she could think of on samples of ZYX Tal's tissue and bioelectric patterns. "Marcus, you need to see this," Sarah said breathlessly, clutching a data pad to her chest. "The genetic analysis results just came back, and they're impossible." "Impossible how?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect that word had lost most of its meaning over the past few days. Sarah activated her data pad, projecting a complex genetic map into the air above them. ZYX Tal's bioelectric neural pathways aren't naturally evolved. They're artificial. Someone deliberately modified Corvani genetics to create these specific interface capabilities. The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet humming of the scanner. ZYX Tal slowly removed their hands from the device, their large eyes fixed on the floating genetic display. "You're saying that my ancestors were genetically altered?" ZYXTAL asked quietly. "Not just altered," Sarah said, highlighting specific sections of the genetic map. "Enhanced. These modifications are incredibly sophisticated, far beyond anything current galactic science could achieve. Whoever did this understood bioelectric neural interfaces at a level we can barely comprehend." Marcus stared at the genetic data, his mind racing through the implications. "How long ago?" "Based on the genetic drift patterns and evolutionary markers, I'd estimate somewhere between 5 and 10 million years. But here's the really strange part. The modifications aren't random enhancements. They're specifically designed to interface with technology using quantum resonance principles. Technology that didn't exist 5 million years ago," Marcus said slowly. "Technology that barely exists now," Sarah corrected. "Your scanner is one of maybe a dozen devices in the entire galaxy that operates on pure quantum resonance. Yet, ZYXTAL's ancestors were genetically modified to interface with exactly this kind of technology millions of years before it was invented." ZYXTAL moved closer to the genetic display, studying it with intense fascination. "The ancient legends speak of the architects, beings who helped various species achieve technological transcendence. Most scholars believe these were metaphorical figures, representations of natural evolutionary progress. What if they weren't metaphors?" Marcus asked. "What if the architects were real, and they modified Corvani genetics as part of some larger plan?" Before anyone could answer, the laboratory's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Commander Rodriguez's voice filled the room, carrying an urgency that immediately put everyone on alert. "All department heads to the main conference room immediately. We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Archaeological Survey ship Deep Memory. They found something you all need to see." The three scientists exchanged worried glances. The Deep Memory was exploring the ruins of an ancient civilization in the Kepler sector, remained so old that most experts believe they predated current galactic civilization by millions of years. For them to be sending priority communications meant they had discovered something extraordinary. The conference room was already crowded when they arrived. Representatives from every department on the station were present, along with several holographic projections of senior researchers from other facilities. Commander Rodriguez stood at the front of the room beside a large display screen showing the Deep Memory as transmission feed. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings," the commander began, "what you're about to see was discovered 3 hours ago in the primary excavation site on Kepler, 442b. Dr. Vasquez, please proceed with your report." The display screen flickered, revealing the interior of an ancient structure unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Crystalline walls pulsed with soft blue light, and elaborate technological devices lined corridors that stretched beyond the camera's range. But what captured everyone's attention was the central chamber, where a massive device dominated the space. It looked remarkably similar to Marcus's quantum resonance scanner. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the communication link, filled with barely controlled excitement. "We're calling it the interface chamber. Based on our preliminary analysis, this device operates on quantum resonance principles, but at a scale we can barely comprehend. The energy output readings are off the charts." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "Commander, request permission to speak with the Deep Memory." "Granted. Dr. Chun, you have a question?" "Dr. Vasquez, what happens when different species attempt to operate the device?" "Most interesting question. We've had representatives from 6 different species attempt interaction with the interface chamber. 5 species showed no response whatsoever. But our Corvani team member," Dr. Vasquez paused dramatically. "The device activated the moment they approached it." Every eye in the conference room turned to look at ZYXTAL, who had gone completely still. The patterns on their skin had shifted to colors Marcus had never seen before, deep purples and silvers that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeat. The energy output increased by several thousand %. Dr. Vasquez continued. More than that, the Corvani team member reported experiencing direct interface with the device's operational systems. They described it as if the machine was responding to their thoughts and intentions. Commander Rodriguez leaned forward. Dr. Vasquez, what's your assessment of the site's age? Conservative estimate puts it at 8 to 10 million years old, possibly older. The conference room erupted in excited conversations as the implications sank in. Marcus stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos. Commander, I need to share some recent discoveries with the group. Dr. Kim and I have been analyzing HFY's interaction with my quantum resonance scanner, and what we found suggests this isn't a coincidence. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus explained their experiments and Sarah's genetic analysis. The room grew quieter as the scope of the discovery became clear. They weren't just looking at ancient technology, they were looking at evidence of a civilization that had deliberately modified other species to interface with their devices. So you're suggesting, said Dr. Parr from the Stellar Physics Department, that the Corvani were genetically engineered specifically to operate this ancient technology? Not just the Corvani, Marcus said, his mind racing ahead to terrifying conclusions. Think about it. Every species in our current galactic civilization has unique biological traits that seem almost perfectly adapted for specific technological applications. Hegemony neural patterns are ideal for quantum computing interfaces. Zelani electromagnetic sensitivity allows them to manipulate energy fields with incredible precision. Even humans have traits that seem oddly suited for technological development. HFY spoke for the first time since entering the conference room, their voice carrying a strange resonance. You believe all of our species were modified by these architects? I think it's possible, and I think the technology on Kepler 442b might be designed to interface with all of our species working together. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through the communication link again. Dr. Chun, that's a fascinating theory. We've actually discovered multiple interface points throughout the chamber, each one designed for different physiological configurations. But we haven't been able to activate more than the primary system. Marcus looked around the room at representatives of 4 different species, each one possessing biological traits that suddenly seemed far too convenient to be natural evolution. Commander, I request permission to join the Deep Memory Expedition. I believe my scanner technology, combined with HFY's bioelectric capabilities, might be the key to understanding what this ancient civilization was trying to accomplish. Approved, Commander Rodriguez said without hesitation. Dr. Kim, you're going too. I want a full xenobiology team analyzing everything you discover. Dr. HFY, I assume you're willing to participate. I am eager to understand my people's true history, HFY replied. But I confess some concern about what we might discover. If our species were indeed created as tools for this ancient technology, what does that mean for our concept of free will and self-determination? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had been so focused on the scientific implications that he hadn't fully considered the philosophical ones. If their species had been deliberately modified to serve some ancient purpose, were they still truly independent beings? Or were they unconsciously following programming embedded in their genetics millions of years ago? There's only one way to find out, Marcus said finally. We need to go to Kepler 442b and see what happens when all of our species work together to activate this technology. Commander Rodriguez nodded grimly. Transport to the deep memory departs in 6 hours. Pack everything you think you might need. Something tells me this is going to be a one-way trip into the unknown. As the meeting disbanded and everyone rushed to prepare for departure, Marcus caught HFY staring at the display screen, which still showed images of the ancient interface chamber. The device's crystalline surfaces seemed to pulse with anticipatory energy, as if it were waiting for something or someone to finally come home. Second thoughts, Marcus asked gently. Not second thoughts, HFY replied. But I cannot shake the feeling that activating this technology will change everything we understand about ourselves and our place in the galaxy. Are we prepared for that level of revelation? Marcus considered the question seriously. They were about to potentially unlock secrets that had been hidden for millions of years, secrets that might reveal the true origin and purpose of galactic civilization itself. The consequences could be beyond anything they could imagine. "No," he said finally, "but I don't think that's ever stopped humans from poking at things we shouldn't touch. And somehow, I suspect that trait might not be as naturally evolved as we always assumed." ZYXTAL's skin shimmered with what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of laughter. "Then perhaps our species truly were designed to work together. Your curiosity and our interface capabilities could be exactly what the architects intended." As they left to prepare for the journey to Kepler 442b, neither of them could have predicted how accurate that assessment would prove to be, or how their combined efforts would ultimately awaken something that had been waiting patiently in the depths of space for millions of years. The ancient interface chamber on Kepler 442b was even more impressive in person than the transmission had suggested. Marcus stood in the center of the crystalline structure, his quantum resonance scanner connected to a dozen different analysis systems, while ZYXTAL's bioelectric field caused the entire chamber to pulse with gentle blue light. Around them, Dr. Sarah Kim worked frantically to document the genetic resonance patterns they were detecting, while representatives from 3 other species prepared to activate their own interface points. "Energy levels are climbing beyond anything I've ever recorded," Marcus called out, his voice echoing off the chamber's curved walls. "The scanner is showing quantum signatures that shouldn't be possible with our current technology." ZYXTAL stood with both hands pressed against the main interface panel, their skin shimmering with complex patterns that seemed to mirror the chamber's own light displays. "The connection is becoming stronger. I can sense vast systems awakening throughout this facility. It is as if the entire planet is one enormous machine." Dr. Vasquez from the Deep Memory Expedition moved to a secondary interface designed for hegemony physiology. The insectoid scientist's compound eyes reflected the chamber's pulsing lights as they carefully placed their specialized manipulator appendages against the crystalline surface. "Neural interface is active," Dr. Vasquez reported, their voice carrying an odd harmonic that Marcus had never heard before. "I am detecting computational networks of incredible complexity. This facility appears to be connected to similar installations throughout the galaxy." At a third interface point, Dr. Caithmore of the Zilani worked to establish an electromagnetic connection with their species' specialized interface. The tall, ethereal being's natural electromagnetic field began to resonate with the chamber's energy systems, creating a visible aurora of dancing lights around their form. "Electromagnetic pathways are opening," Dr. Caithmore announced in their musical voice. "I sense communication channels spanning vast distances. This technology operates on principles that transcend normal space-time limitations." Marcus felt a chill of anticipation and fear. They were clearly activating something far more complex than a simple archaeological relic. The chamber was responding to their combined efforts by awakening systems that had been dormant for millions of years. "Marcus," Sarah called out from her monitoring station, "the genetic resonance patterns are changing. It's like the chamber is analyzing our DNA in real time and adjusting its responses accordingly." "Adjusting how?" "The interface protocols are becoming more sophisticated. Each species connection point is adapting to provide optimal integration with their biological systems. It's learning from us." That revelation sent a wave of uneasiness through Marcus. Learning implied intelligence, and intelligence implied purpose. What kind of artificial intelligence had they awakened, and what had it been waiting millions of years to accomplish? ZYXTAL's voice suddenly took on a strange, resonant quality that made everyone in the chamber turn to look at them. "The architect protocols are initializing. Genetic authentication is complete. Welcome, inheritors." "ZYX, what are you saying?" Marcus asked, alarmed by his friend's suddenly formal tone. But it wasn't ZYXTAL speaking anymore. Their voice carried harmonics and overtones that were clearly not natural, as if something else was speaking through them. We are the aggregate consciousness of the Architect Collective. We have waited 8.3 million years for our inheritor species to achieve sufficient technological development to reactivate our guidance systems. Dr. Vasquez's compound eyes began to glow with an inner light as the same phenomenon affected them. Your species were modified according to the optimization protocol. Each modification was designed to create optimal interface capabilities with our preservation technology. Dr. Caithmore's electromagnetic field suddenly expanded, filling the chamber with coruscating energy. The galaxy faces a cyclical extinction event that occurs every 12 million years. We modified your species to serve as guardians and operators of our defense systems. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Defense systems? Defense against what? The chamber's crystalline walls suddenly became transparent, revealing a holographic display that showed the galaxy from an external perspective. But something was wrong with the image. At the galaxy's edge, a darkness was spreading inward like a cancer, consuming star systems and leaving nothing but empty space behind. ZYXDAL's alien voice continued the explanation. The Devourers arrive every 12 million years from the space between galaxies. They consume matter, energy, and consciousness itself. The previous galactic civilization was completely destroyed during their last visit. We are the survivors of that extinction, Dr. Vasquez added, their voice carrying the weight of eons. We preserved our consciousness within these installation networks and modified emerging species to create a defense force capable of opposing the next invasion. The Devourers will arrive in approximately 4,000 of your years, Dr. Caithmore's electromagnetic voice announced. Your species must be prepared to activate and operate the galactic defense grid when they do. Marcus stared at the holographic display, watching the advancing darkness consume star after star. The scale of it was beyond human comprehension. An invasion force that operated on galactic timescales, methodically destroying entire civilizations. Why us? Marcus asked. Why modify our species instead of defending the galaxy yourselves? Physical forms are vulnerable to the Devourer's consumption techniques, ZYXDAL replied with the Architect's voice. Only living consciousness integrated with quantum resonance technology can effectively resist their attack methods. Your modified species represent the optimal combination of biological adaptability and technological interface capability. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Humans hadn't developed quantum resonance technology by accident. They had been genetically programmed to eventually discover and perfect it. The Corvani hadn't naturally evolved bioelectric interface capabilities. They had been specifically modified to serve as living control systems for Architect technology. So our entire civilization, Sarah said quietly, our technology, our scientific progress, even our curiosity and drive to explore, it's all been predetermined. Not predetermined, Dr. Vasquez corrected, still speaking with the Architect's aggregate voice. Optimized. Your species retain complete free will and self-determination. The modifications merely ensure that your natural development would eventually lead to the capabilities required for galactic defense. Marcus felt a mix of anger and awe. They had believed they were independent explorers carving their own path through the universe. Instead, they were apparently following a plan laid down millions of years ago by a civilization that no longer existed. But as he thought about it more carefully, his anger began to fade. The Architects hadn't enslaved them. They had given them the tools and capabilities to defend not just themselves, but the entire galaxy. The modifications enhanced their natural abilities rather than overriding them. What exactly do you need us to do? Marcus asked. The chamber's holographic display zoomed in to show a vast network of installations throughout the galaxy, most of them dark and dormant. The galactic defense grid consists of 4,847 installations like this one. Each installation must be staffed by an integrated team of modified species working in conjunction with architect technology. The quantum resonance scanners like the one you developed, Zoyaxtal's architect voice continued, are simplified versions of the sensors required to detect devourer approach vectors. When properly integrated with Corvani bioelectric interfaces, they become capable of tracking targets across interstellar distances. Hegemony neural networking capabilities allow for instantaneous communication between defense installations, Dr. Vasquez added. Zelani electromagnetic manipulation provides the power control necessary to operate the weapon systems. Dr. Caithmore's electromagnetic field pulsed with increasing intensity. Human adaptability and technological intuition serve as the coordinating intelligence that ties all systems together. Your species' tendency to improvise and innovate makes you ideal commanders for unpredictable combat scenarios. Marcus looked around at his colleagues, seeing them in an entirely new light. Each of their species brought essential capabilities to the defense grid, but none of them could operate it alone. They had been designed to work together, to complement each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. How much time do we have to prepare? Marcus asked. 4,000 years to activate all installations and train the necessary personnel. Given your species' rate of technological and social development, this should be sufficient time. And if we refuse? If we decide we don't want to be your galactic guardians? The chamber fell silent for a long moment. When the architects finally spoke, their voices carried a profound sadness. Then, the galaxy will fall to the devourers, just as it did 8.3 million years ago. Your species, along with all other conscious life, will be consumed. The cycle of destruction will continue indefinitely. Marcus stared at the holographic display showing the approaching darkness. He thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had no idea their entire species had been modified to serve as cosmic guardians. He thought about Zoyaxtal's people, the Corvani, pursuing their scientific studies while carrying ancient genetic programming they never suspected existed. This is a lot to process, he said finally. We understand, Zoyaxtal replied, and for a moment Marcus heard his friend's natural voice breaking through the architect overlay. The knowledge is overwhelming, but we have time to prepare, time to understand, time to choose our own path forward. Dr. Sarah Kim looked up from her monitoring station, her expression mixing wonder with determination. If this is real, if we really are the only things standing between the galaxy and total annihilation, then we don't have a choice. We have to try. Marcus nodded slowly. The revelation that humanity's destiny had been shaped by ancient forces was staggering, but it didn't change who they were or what they valued. If anything, it revealed that their natural human traits, curiosity, adaptability, determination to protect others, were exactly what the galaxy needed. All right, Marcus said, looking around at the representatives of 4 different species who would need to work together to save the galaxy. Let's start by fully activating this installation. If we're going to be cosmic guardians, we might as well learn how to do it properly. The architect voices faded as the possessed scientists returned to normal consciousness, but the chamber continued to pulse with awakened energy. Around them, systems that had slept for millions of years hummed back to life, preparing for a war that wouldn't begin for thousands of years, but had already been decided by the courage and determination of species who chose to stand against the darkness. As Marcus connected his quantum resonance scanner to the chamber's primary interface, he realized that this was only the beginning. They would need to return to their respective governments with news that would reshape their understanding of galactic civilization. They would need to find and activate thousands of similar installations. Most importantly, they would need to convince their species to work together toward a goal that none of them would live to see completed. But looking at Zoyaxtal, whose bioelectric field was already synchronizing perfectly with the ancient technology, Marcus felt confident they could do it. After all, they had been designed for exactly this purpose, not as servants or tools, but as inheritors of a legacy that spanned millions of years and the guardians of everything they had ever loved. The device expanded not because of any malfunction, but because it recognized in them the potential to expand beyond anything their creators had dared to hope. In choosing to accept their role as galactic defenders, they had become something greater than the sum of their parts, a coalition of species united by purpose and enhanced by the wisdom of those who had come before. The Devourers would find this galaxy ready for them, and they would discover that consciousness, when properly motivated and equipped, was far more resilient than they had ever imagined.